This lesson we're going to be looking at some more properties that we can use with Flex. So let's set the display prop, or we're going to set the display property to Flex of the main container, and then we're also going to align the items and use stretch from what we saw last time in order to apply some alignment of the items. We'll do a quick refresh, and this is what we currently have, where we've got all of the divs within the container. And now what we want to do is reorder them. And we can do that individually by selecting those elements and applying a value for order. So let's select the first one and provide, under the order property, set the first one to be in position number 4 in the order. So that moves it down to the end. And the order is going to be based on the values. So the larger value for the order is going to place the other item or the other element after. So right now 1 is going to go after 2, and they're both going to be at the end. So we've got 2 and then we've got 1, because 2 was holding a smaller order value. And this is the same thing if we do a value of 1 for the order and go back out. It's going to also keep it within the same position. Let's do one more where we'll select the element with a class of 6 and apply a value for order of this, and let's do 100. So I know there's not 100 divs there, but either way, it's as long as the number is larger, it's going to make that application and position it. So it doesn't matter how many divs you have here, but just make sure if you are using order that you can order them with enough numbers that you have to move them around. There's also flex grow property, which specifies how much an item will grow relative to the rest of the flex items. And this is again provided individually and provide that flex grow value. So let me comment out these selections, and we're going to apply that to each one of the individual elements, each one of the divs. So again, select that first one there and specifying the flex grow value and showing how much it's going to grow compared to the rest of them. So set this to 2. And now this one is going to be taking up twice as much space as the other ones, but we haven't set any grow values to those, so it has nothing to reference it. So it's automatically, because that number is larger and these ones are just automatically setting, it's automatically going to grow it. If we want to do for all of them, set a value for flex grow, and we want to apply for 2 and then for 3 and for 4 a value of 1. Now the proportions are going to be that 1, when there is space, is going to have twice the width of 2, 3, and 4, and then we still haven't set anything for 5 and 6. So that's how you can use the flex grow. Shrink will specify how much a flex item will shrink relative to the rest of the flex items. So setting a shrink value to each one of the elements, and you don't have to specify the shrink in particular. So we've got grow on those. Let's do a shrink on 5, and let's use flex shrink. So again, how much it's going to shrink in relation to the other elements. And I'll set the flex shrink to 0. So what the shrink is going to do is it's not going to allow it to shrink. So notice it's slightly different when we're resizing it, and the behavior is slightly different than what the other elements are doing. It might be a little bit hard to see with the flex grow, so let's go in and remove those. So let's make a selection and refresh. So that shows more of the red parent container that we have, and we still have the shrink on the element with a class of 5. So that's the one here in the middle where we've got the word 5 and 5 paragraph content. So essentially it's not going to shrink less than the initial value that's set for the width, and it's going to shrink at a different rate, and you can see that when we really resize it. And we see that coming into effect, and it's not allowing it to shrink. So element with a class of 5 is not shrinking as much as the other elements. So this is more on a shrink. So realistically, maybe we should make the element width bigger, and we'll be able to see this effect sooner. So resizing, so at the point where they all have space here, so there's still some space within the parent container that's indicated with the red, background, and as we start to shrink it, it's not going to shrink at the same rate as the other elements that are surrounding it. There's also flex basis, so that will set the initial length of a flex item. So applying that to the element 1, and let's apply flex basis and set up a default flex basis value of 400 for that element. So its initial value is larger, but it still shrinks and resizes depending on the space. And you can also use the shorthand property for all of them together, and that's just the flex value. So flex is shorthand, and it takes into consideration the flex grow, the flex shrink, and the flex basis properties in that order. So setting the first value, if you don't want it to grow and you don't want it to shrink, but you want to only set the flex basis to 400 pixels. That's how you can do that. So the default of it is going to be at 400 pixels, but then when we're resizing, because we've set shrink to not shrinkable, and that means that's staying at the 400 pixels, and 0 is also not growable, so it's not going to expand past the 400 pixels. So that's what the zeros mean within this statement, where the first one indicates if it's growable. If it is growable and if it is shrinkable, then we can set a value for those. So updating that will allow it to shrink under the 400 pixels. So setting the 0 to a 1 will allow it to change the way that it's behaving when it's shrinking or growing. There's also self-align properties. So you can apply the align self value, and if you want to center it, and we already saw what the flex end and flex start will do. So applying that will center that element, and we see the red space from the parent container is now visible when we center it. And let's apply a few more of the aligns. So going into the element with the class of floor and align self. For this one, we'll do a flex end, and then we'll do one more for element with the class of 6, and that one will do a flex start, so we can see what the difference is. And save it, and let's go out and check it out within our model. So 4 is down at the bottom, and 6 is at the top, because we applied the flex end and the flex start to those elements. Get familiar with the various flex properties that we've covered, and then you're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson where we've got a challenge for you.